The studio buzzed with anticipation. Laughter rolled across the room, mixing with the warm-up music as the crowd settled into their seats. When the lights dimmed and the show's theme faded, a figure stepped onto the stage. Malcolm Drake, smooth and smug, wearing a navy velvet jacket and a grin like he owned the room. He welcomed the audience with practiced charm, promising legacy, controversy, and just the right amount of style. Then, with a theatrical wave, he introduced the night's special guest, the future face of the action franchise Shadow Code. Sofia Marquez walked in, tall, composed, dressed in sharp black. No shimmer, no smiles for show, just focus. She sat gracefully, eyes forward, hands steady. Malcolm didn't waste time. "So be honest," he said, his voice soaked in sarcasm. "When they offered you the role, did you think, wow, they've finally run out of guys?" Laughter came, some real, some uneasy. Sofia smiled, cool and unbothered. "No," she replied, "I thought it was time." He pushed harder, teasing about eyeliner and elegance, about how a stoic killer had been turned into a glossy reboot. But her response was precise. Precision isn't gendered. With every question, the tension in the room grew. Malcolm's tone walked the line between mockery and charm, but Sofia didn't flinch. When he suggested she couldn't possibly brood like a man who's lost everything, she replied calmly, "You don't need stubble to carry grief." Somewhere in the shadows, Keanu Reeves was watching, silent, observing, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. The laughter faded, the lights focused tighter. The energy in the studio shifted, curious, unsure. Malcolm leaned forward, eyes gleaming, voice light with mischief. He'd brought up the internet storm, the chaos online since Sofia's casting. Fans were divided. Some cheered her on, others clung to nostalgia like a shield. But Sofia didn't blink. "Fire clears paths," she said. Malcolm continued, weaving his words like traps. He called the original franchise a tribute to silence and brutality, a man who turned grief into a myth. "You're a different vibe," he added, letting the implication hang in the air. Sofia nodded. "Different doesn't mean diluted." Still, he pressed on. "So did you audition, or did they just like the way you look?" She sat straighter. "I trained for 6 months, fought for every beat, earned every move." He chuckled. "Not even a pedicure in between?" The room gasped. Sofia's voice turned cold. "If I were a man, would you ask if I got the part between beers and football?" That landed. Applause broke through the awkward air. The crowd was beginning to see something shift. Then the lights changed. A booming voice filled the room, announcing the entrance of the man who had defined the legend. The crowd erupted. Keanu Reeves walked onto the stage in silence. No grand gesture, no big smile. Dressed in black, a silver cross barely peeking from beneath his collar, he radiated calm. He greeted Sofia with a simple nod and took his seat. Malcolm leaned in like a wolf circling prey. "You've played Elias Vane for 10 years, he said. "Now you're handing over the torch. How does that feel?" Keanu took a breath. "Pain doesn't have a gender," he said. "Neither does justice." A hush fell. He wasn't here to entertain, he was here to remind them what the story was always about. Malcolm faltered slightly but tried again. "Isn't it strange?" he asked. "Watching someone else wear the scars you wore?" Keanu looked at Sofia. "Scars aren't costumes," he said. "They're truths, and she understands them." The crowd leaned in. Something had changed. This was no longer Malcolm's stage. The crowd had fallen into a hush, not the kind that follows silence, but the kind that anticipates it. There was a tension in the air, like everyone had collectively forgotten to breathe. Malcolm tried to cut through it with humor. He leaned back and chuckled. "Let's not get all sentimental," he said with a smile too wide, too rehearsed. "I mean, Keanu, you're the guy who redefined stoic masculinity, and now the role's being reinvented? In heels?" There was a twitch in the room, some nervous laughter, but most just watched. Keanu didn't react. He sat still, eyes quiet, his presence louder than any retort. Then came his answer, soft but firm. You think it's about heels, I think it's about carrying weight. Malcolm pressed on, still trying to own the moment. So she's carrying the story now? Keanu didn't hesitate. She's carrying what matters, the silence between the gunshots, the reason the trigger was pulled in the first place. Sophia turned to him, not surprised, just seen. She looked out at the crowd and added, everyone thinks action is about violence. It's not. It's about choice. Malcolm shifted. So, what are you choosing to prove? She didn't blink. That I don't need to ask for permission to be powerful. The applause was growing, deeper, more sincere. Malcolm smirked, tried to change the rhythm. As long as there's enough explosions in the trailer, right? Keanu's reply came low. What explodes louder than truth? The joke didn't land, the tension was back, but now it was focused. Then Malcolm's eyes dropped to the small silver cross around Keanu's neck. He smiled. You still wear that? He asked. The words dipped in something smug. Bit outdated, isn't it? Faith? Spirituality? Hollywood doesn't really run on prayer. Keanu reached up slowly and touched the cross, not to show it, but to feel it. His voice dropped. It's not a prop, he said. When everything else broke, it's what stayed. The air changed. Someone in the audience coughed. Another just whispered, wow. I didn't wear this to be noticed, Keanu added. I wore it to survive. Malcolm opened his mouth, but this time nothing clever came out. The cards in his hand were still there, but they suddenly felt very, very small. The silence wasn't just stillness now. It had become pressure. It wrapped around the room, pulling everyone into a single breath they were afraid to release. Malcolm, trying to recover his ground, forced a laugh that sounded thinner than usual. Okay, he said, voice lighter than the moment deserved. So we're getting philosophical now. Truth, scars, survival. Next thing you'll tell me, action films are therapy. Keanu tilted his head slightly. His words came slow and weighted. Only for those watching. For those living it, it's memory. Memory of what? Malcolm asked. Of loss, Keanu said. Of being told your pain doesn't matter because it doesn't look like the hero we've been sold. Sophia added softly. Or the heroine we're expected to be. Malcolm scoffed, crossing his arms. So now it's grief counseling with gunfights? Keanu didn't flinch. No, it's finally showing that silence isn't weakness, it's discipline. The words landed like a punch wrapped in silk. A few people in the audience murmured in agreement. One woman whispered, "That's the line." Malcolm leaned in, sharper now. So what? You're the monk now, spouting wisdom while bullets fly? Keanu's voice was even. Maybe the world's tired of watching people shoot without knowing why they're pulling the trigger. Sophia turned her eyes toward him and then toward Malcolm. Maybe the why is what scares you. That hit harder than any line before. Applause broke out again, uncoached, real, and rising. Malcolm's jaw tensed, but he wasn't done. He pivoted to the old formula. Action made masculinity cool again, he said. Brooding stares, silent rage, muscle-bound redemption arcs. That's what the fans come for. Keanu leaned back as if reflecting on the very idea. Then maybe, he said, it's time they came for something stronger. Emotional clarity. A few claps, some nods. Malcolm smirked. You really think the audience wants that? Keanu turned his gaze toward Sophia. They want truth, he said. They just don't expect it to look like her. It wasn't applause this time. It was a roar. The audience surged. A few stood. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, visibly rattled now. So Sophia's the new Elias Vane? Keanu shook his head. No, she's someone else. Someone we didn't know we needed. Sophia's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I didn't take this role to echo him, she said. I took it to say something new. Malcolm hesitated. And what's that? She turned toward the camera. That strength doesn't always come with stubble. For a second, just a second, the entire studio held its breath. Then it erupted. The applause faded, but the energy didn't. It lingered in the air like a charge, waiting to strike again. Malcolm shuffled the cue cards in his lap, more to busy his hands than anything else. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the grin of someone grasping for control and realizing it might be slipping. He leaned forward, voice coated in artificial warmth. "Let's get real, Sophia," he said. "You've come a long way, from cleaning houses to headlining films. What you do, kill a few producers on the way up?" The air snapped. Gasps, a sharp intake of breath, even the cameras seemed to hesitate. But Sophia didn't. She looked at him, not angry, not broken, just tired of this game. "No," she said, calm and clean. "I worked twice as hard. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that." It was a slap without volume. The audience stirred, shifting, clapping slowly. The tide was changing and everyone could feel it. Keanu didn't move. His posture remained solid, but his eyes, they were colder now, sharper, watching. Malcolm tried to recover. "Hey now, just a joke, lighten up. I mean, who do you think? Your agent, your accent?" Sophia didn't flinch. "I thank every no that made me stronger, every room that told me I didn't belong. Because I do now." The audience erupted. This wasn't applause anymore, it was alignment, recognition. Malcolm's smile cracked. He turned toward Keanu, hoping for an ally. "Okay, so she's the face now. But you, Keanu, let's be honest. You're just passing through now, right? Just a relic." Silence. Keanu looked at him, not with anger, not with pity, just stillness. Then he spoke. "You ever see a torch pass, Malcolm?" Malcolm shrugged. "Sure." "Then you know," Keanu said, "the flame doesn't lose its heat. It just burns somewhere new." That landed like thunder. Applause broke out again, not because it was clever, but because it was true. Malcolm forced one last smirk. "All right, Zen Master, but aren't you afraid that one day no one remembers the name Keanu Reeves?" Keanu leaned forward, his voice low but unmistakable. "You only worry about being forgotten," he said, "when you know you never gave them a reason to remember you." Silence. Sophia sat beside him, nodding slowly. In the second row, someone stood, then another, and another. Malcolm looked down at the cards in his lap, bent at the corners, worthless now. And for the first time that night, he had nothing left to say. The room was still trembling from the last thing Keanu said, but what came next didn't come from him. It came from her. Sophia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The air itself leaned in to listen. Malcolm tried to regain his footing, flipping through his cards like they might save him. He chuckled nervously, lifting his chin. All right. Sophia, help me understand something. What made you think you could lead a franchise built on blood, grief, and vengeance?" Sophia didn't blink. "I didn't think," she said. "I knew." He scoffed. "Confidence or delusion?" Her reply came without pause. "Survival." Then she leaned forward, not to attack, but to stand her ground. "You want to talk about where I came from?" she said. "Fine. I cleaned houses, scrubbed floors, memorized lines during lunch breaks. I walked into auditions with the wrong accent, the wrong shoes, the wrong everything, and I stayed." The room went silent. This wasn't a performance. This was history speaking. "Because I knew I didn't have to fit your mold to break it." A murmur rippled across the crowd. Someone in the front row wiped a tear away discreetly. Someone else whispered, "She's doing it." Malcolm fidgeted. "So this is about proving something?" Sophia shook her head. "No. It's about showing what's possible when people stop asking for permission to exist." She glanced to her left. Keanu didn't speak, but the look in his eyes said everything. Respect, recognition, and something close to pride. "You think I'm here to be the next Elias Vane?" she continued. "I'm not. I'm here to be the first Sophia Marquez." The applause rose, not in volume, but in weight. People stood again, not because the moment demanded it, but because their instincts did. Malcolm's voice dropped. You really believe they're ready for that? I'm not here because they were ready, she said. I'm here because I am. Then she turned, not toward Malcolm, but toward the crowd. Her eyes found the ones who had been waiting, the ones who had never seen themselves at the center of the story until now. If you see yourself in me, she said, then it was worth it, and if you don't, yet, look closer. It was no longer just applause. It was a roar. And Malcolm? He didn't even bother pretending to smile anymore, because no line on his cards could top that. The room had changed, not in lighting or sound, but in energy. It was no longer a studio. It was a moment suspended in time. Malcolm looked around, searching for a way back into control. The cue cards in his hands felt thinner now, like paper shields against a tidal wave. His words came slow, almost uncertain. So, Keanu, he said, voice laced with desperation, don't you think it's a little tragic, watching someone else take your spotlight? Keanu didn't respond right away. He folded his hands, let the silence settle, then leaned forward, not with force, but with certainty. It's not tragic, he said. It's necessary. Malcolm blinked. Necessary? There's a difference between fading and stepping aside, Keanu continued. One is fear, the other is choice. Sophia turned to him slightly, listening not as a peer, but as someone witnessing a rite of passage. You think legacy is about holding on, Keanu said, but it's really about knowing when to let go, so something greater can rise. Malcolm tried to lighten the mood again. So what? You're the Obi-Wan of action cinema now? Keanu offered a small smile. I've just learned that the spotlight is less important than the story. He turned to Sophia, not as mentor to student, not as past to future, but as equal to equal. And she's the story now. Sophia didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed with something deeper, recognition. Malcolm pushed again, reaching. But what if the audience doesn't follow her? Keanu turned back, calm as ever. Then they weren't really following me, just my shadow. Sophia stood slowly. There was no drama in her movement, just resolve. And one by one, the audience rose with her. Malcolm stood too, but not to lead, only to catch up. Keanu stood last. He looked out at the room, a sea of faces, some inspired, some changed, all awake. What made Elias Vane legendary, he said, wasn't the violence, it was the pain, the code, the restraint. He paused, then nodded towards Sophia. And she carries all of that plus something I never could? Malcolm asked quietly now. And what's that? Keanu looked directly at her, then answered. A new beginning. There was no drum roll, no final line from the band, no applause cue needed. Because what followed was a standing ovation, not loud and wild, but deep, honest, earned. Malcolm lowered his eyes. The interview had ended, but something far more powerful had just begun. The lights dimmed, and for the first time all night, the stage was truly silent. No applause, no tension, just breath, just presence. The audience had risen not for entertainment, but for truth. The cameras stopped rolling. The show, at least in name, was over. But what it left behind wasn't just ratings or a viral moment. It was something else. For Malcolm Drake, the night wasn't a disaster. It was a mirror, and sometimes the most brutal reflection is the one you didn't expect to see. For Sophia Marquez, it wasn't just a debut. It was a declaration that strength doesn't ask for permission, that power doesn't always enter with volume. Sometimes it walks in wearing quiet and steel. And for Keanu Reeves, this wasn't an ending. It was clarity. Because legacy isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the voice that speaks last when silence matters most. Years from now, few will remember the jokes that fell flat or the man who told them, but they'll remember the woman who didn't flinch. They'll remember the man who passed the flame, not to preserve his name, but to keep something greater alive. And they'll remember the moment when a stage turned into a reckoning, not with fists, not with gunfire, but with stillness, with truth. with courage, and with fire that didn't burn out, but burned forward.